It feels like forever ago since Netflix released part 1 of Cobra Kai's season 6, and finally we've now got part 2. Things are definitely heating up, and let's just say things are really getting intense. And now we have to wait until the new year for part 3. The wait is seriously going to feel like an eternity. For now though, let's just focus on what part 2 brings to the table. So my friends, with Cobra Kai part 2 now available on Netflix, do we have a blockbuster, a 50-50, or a flopbuster on our hands? In Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2, the Sekai Taikai tournament takes centre stage, bringing together elite dojos from around the world. The Iron Dragons add a fresh dynamic to the competition, forcing Miyagi-Do to step up their game. The students must not only face tension from internal rivalries, but also these new skilled opponents who have a different approach to karate. Miyagi-Do's already fragile unity is further tested after Tori heads back to rejoin Cobra Kai, just as they're preparing for the Sekai Taikai. The biggest challenge comes from the Iron Dragons, whose style and tactics are unlike anything Miyagi-Do has encountered before. The arrival of Sensei Wolf and his team puts everything on edge, raising the stakes of the tournament. Meanwhile, old personal conflicts continue, threatening to derail the team before they face their toughest opponents yet. The resolution is still unfolding, but as Miyagi-Do faces the Iron Dragons, they must not only overcome their internal conflicts, but also adapt to the new style of combat. As the tournament progresses, the students will be forced to work through their issues and focus on the competition. Tori's complex role within Cobra Kai could play a pivotal role in shifting alliances and deciding the outcome. Ultimately, the Sekai Taikai will provide the stage for those characters to prove their growth and resolve. With part 2, we're getting 5 episodes that are roughly made up of between 35 and 45 minutes in length. So it's definitely more than achievable to be able to binge watch your way through the whole of part 2. The plot and storyline for the show has really felt like it's found another level, becoming more explosive and unpredictable. If I think about everything that's gone on in the show, even in part 1, there's been a lot of challenges, and refocusing our attention into part 2 has even gone that much further, because by the end of part 1 we saw Tori make the change and shift in her alliance. But now, in part 2, that change of alliance is being further explored and developed. We have the Iron Dragons who have just disrupted and jumped onto the scene, making an unexpected announcement to the Sekai Taikai competition, and they're really showing what they're made of. We've also got some consistency threaded through, which is that Cobra Kai have maintained their position in constantly trying to disrupt Miyagi-Do karate. But the interesting thing about Cobra Kai in part 2 that we saw being built up in part 1 is that they're being unleashed. Quan is really disrupting them. He's taking advantage of the fragile relationships that have come over from America to Barcelona. For example, we're seeing Robbie, who's really taking things to heart, with the change of Tori leaving Miyagi-Do and going to Cobra Kai. Quan is doing everything possible to try and make sure that he is fully throwing Robbie off of his game. Overall, part 2 of season 6 has really lived up to expectations. It's provided a masterful and thrilling next stage of the story, and it really grips you with everything that's sort of going on. It's not going rogue, but it's definitely not afraid to push the boundaries when it comes to keeping you captivated and keeping your heart rate elevated through the suspense-driven moments, and there's a lot of them. The standout moment for me with part 2 would have to be what I'm calling the Royal Rumble, which literally had all karate hell breaking loose. Gunther Braun, who is the head of the Sekai Taikai tournament, has always exuded power, strength and authority. But the further into the tournament that we go, the more intense things start to get. The tension that's then continually built is then unleashed in its full force. And let me tell you, it was high suspense karate action. The Royal Rumble scene is where the stability and control of the Sekai Taikai tournament comes crashing down, almost like a flick of a switch. The tension that has been simmering boils over when a clash between rival dojos spirals out of control. What begins as a high-stakes match quickly descends into chaos as rules are ignored, alliances are tested, and the line between competition and survival blurs. Gunther Braun's authority is put to its ultimate test as the tournament's integrity hangs by a thread. Despite Gunther Braun's attempt to regain order, the chaos continues to escalate until key fighters such as Daniel, Johnny, and Chosen intervene to separate the fractions and bring the situation under control. However, the resolution is far from neat. It leaves lasting scars on the competitors and fans alike. The explosive showdown ends with a devastating cliffhanger, unresolved rivalries, shocking betrayals, and the ominous promise of even higher stakes in Part 3. By the end of the Royal Rumble scene, you can definitely feel like you've been through one heck of a ride. But even then, you're left with a massive cliffhanger at the end. And now we have to wait for Part 3, which is so annoying, but only because it was that good. When it comes to the critiques of Part 2, I've narrowed it down to two in particular. The first is that the issues surrounding the individual characters, such as Robbie and Miguel, get dragged on, and it almost feels like you're sitting there thinking, when is this going to come to its inevitable outcome? The second is stepping outside of the story for a minute and focusing on what Netflix have decided to do with its release of the different parts. Because now we're in a situation where Part 3 has got a lot of added pressure to surpass expectations and really double down in delivering an absolutely phenomenal final outcome. The character dynamics of Cobra Kai are driven by constant drama. Relationships shift between friendship and rivalries, and alliances shift unexpectedly. Part 2 heightens the tensions, with each character facing some sort of personal struggle, while also trying to unite as a team because of the Sekai Taikai competition. And then on top of that, you've got the huge disruptors that are at play, which is the Iron Dragons, who have burst onto the scene and added complete intensity to the tournament and the story. The primary challenge lies in how long these emotional arcs are stretched, making some conflicts feel repetitive. For example, tensions between key characters like Tori and Samantha continue to escalate, but don't reach a meaningful resolution. Similarly, the looming presence of the Sekai Taikai tournament is exciting, but at times overshadowed by drawn-out personal drama, leaving viewers eager for the action to pick up pace. While some of these conflicts simmer without full closure, Part 2 provides enough payoff to keep the story moving forward. Moments like the team finally coming together during high-stakes tournament sequences or surprising twists with the Iron Dragon dojo do bring bursts of energy. However, the biggest resolutions are deliberately withheld, setting up what's likely to be an explosive conclusion in Part 3. The narrative takes time to address smaller character growth moments, which helps ground the story, but ultimately, the payoff is saved for what's coming next. I think Part 2 has been great at introducing the next phase of the show, but it also leaves a bit of mixed feelings. Satisfaction from the intense action drama, but also frustration because of the unresolved conflicts and pacing issues. The cliffhanger certainly builds anticipation, making you really eager to watch Part 3 of the show. But Part 3 now carries the enormous responsibility at being able to deliver a slam dunk with an unforgettable end to the saga. Now, when it comes to the standout performances and character development of the show, I do think it can feel like more of the same. Similar characters that we've definitely seen before that fall out with each other, rivalries that you would think are over that are now back, but the difference this time round is that they were already fragile relationships from Part 1 of the show, which the new characters have been able to see and take advantage of, which actually does make things both believable and exciting. Now, my top picks for the standout ones to watch are Robbie Miguel, John Kreese, Johnny Lawrence, Samantha LaRusso, Daniel LaRusso, Eli, Dimitri, Louis Tan, Axel, and Zara. Now, starting off with Robbie and Miguel, they're finally acting like brothers. But there's a spanner that's thrown into the works, which was off the back of Part 1 and developed now in Part 2. Robbie starts off well, but we see his struggle develop and intensify as we move through Part 2 of the show. The cause of this is all to do with Tori's change of allegiance and going to Cobra Kai. He feels that his relationship is under threat and he can't concentrate, which is causing him to perform poorly in the tournament. On the other hand, when you've got Miguel, he was already feeling a certain type of way by losing out to Robbie in part 1. And he sort of accepts that at the beginning of part 2. But as the performances start to show from Robbie and have the opposite effect with Miguel, who's actually performing at the top of his peak, Miguel's ego starts to push through. And we get to see that through an interaction with him and Robbie, where he's explaining to Robbie the cold hard truth that he doesn't think he's captain material because he's not focused and performing at all like we usually would see him perform. Ultimately, we've been here before with these two characters, just on a less severe level. It can feel like more of the same, but actually they've got that somewhat common ground that they've built since they repaired their relationship. And the resolution between both of these characters towards the latter stages of part 2 actually has a satisfying outcome. Samantha and Tori have an interesting character dynamic. They are very newly crowned friends, and we saw them park their differences in part 1 of the show, but the friendship is fragile, which makes it more realistic and more entertaining, as it's what you would expect. With Tori, we're really seeing the conflict within her come to the surface in this part 2 of the show. We can see that she didn't really want to make the decision to rejoin Cobra Kai, but because of the grief from losing her mother, as well as thinking about her future, she justifies her decision and powers through in order to aim high for winning the competition. Samantha, who wears her heart on her sleeve, shares her thought process behind why she's hurt. She values friendship, and she also values the fact that her friends should always feel that they can come to her and rely on her. Samantha and Tori both have an exchange at the beginning of the show, and through that exchange are cold hard truths, but with a newfound respect. I think it's really good that the progress that was made in part 1 has not gone to waste. And even though they're on opposite sides and extremely different sides to the point where they are ultimate rivals, what their dojos are, they do still have a level of respect and they do still consider themselves as friends. But that friendship is going to have to wait until they conclude the Sekai Taikai tournament and get back to the US. John Kreese and Louis Tam are both major problems for Miyagi-Do. John Kreese with Cobra Kai is where the major rivalry is, but Louis Tam with the Iron Dragons is a newfound rivalry that's organically been created and is the ultimate disruptor to the Miyagi-Do dojo. With John Kreese, as expected, he's up to his old tricks, but he's rattled in part 2 because he's met with a very interesting plot twist that really gets under his skin. On the other hand, with Louis Tan, he really brings excitement and entertainment to the show. In the beginning, you don't think he goes seeking out trouble with Miyagi-Do, but actually he's very strategic and calculated in how he maneuvers what he wants. Overall, I think that John Kreese and Louis Tam really bring that brilliance to the show when it comes to villains. One provides that element of familiarity, while the other provides something fresh and new for the rivalry and disruption, as well as the threats to the Miyagi-Do dojo. Eli and Dimitri continue on from part 1 of the show. The Binary brothers are still not getting along. Eli is annoyed at Dimitri because he keeps talking about how he's going to be going to MIT. And Dimitri is annoyed at Eli because he was supposed to be going to MIT with Dimitri. With both of them, I feel like it's all coming from a place of disappointment because they're going to no longer be able to see one another all the time, and they clearly have a strong friendship. I would say that part 2 does a really good job at developing the conflict between the two friends. The setup from part 1 acts as a good grounding between the two of them, but then in part 2 it is very, very nicely developed, and it's also done in an organic way, which makes it more realistic. That leaves my chosen standout ones to watch out of the ones to watch being none other than Axel and Zara. These two fighters seriously bring the entertainment to part 2 of the show, injecting fresh energy into the Sekai Taikai tournament. During their introduction to the dojo, Zara impresses everyone with her innovative and fluid fighting techniques. Then there's Axel, with raw power and relentless drive, catching the eye of the more seasoned fighters. Their differing approaches create a natural rivalry, but they are forced to work together when paired in a critical training exercise. This unlikely partnership leads to a memorable scene where their combined strengths allow them to take down a group of senior fighters during a sparring challenge. Axel struggles with his overconfidence and inability to adapt when faced with unexpected techniques, often clashing with Zara, who values strategy and precision. Zara, on the other hand, faces doubts about her place in such a high-stakes tournament, questioning whether her unique style can stand up to the brute force of competitors like Axel. Both characters learn to embrace each other's strengths. Axel tempers his aggressive style by adopting some of Zara's calculated movements, while Zara gains confidence by seeing how her technique can complement Axel's raw power. During a pivotal match in the Sekai Taikai, they demonstrate incredible teamwork, earning respect from their peers and proving they deserve to be part of the Cobra Kai legacy. Axel and Zara are definitely my favourite characters in part 2 of Cobra Kai. It showcased how two very different characters can come together and bring the best out of each other. The partnership added emotional stakes to the action, and provided a fresh perspective. Watching their growth in part 2 is incredibly rewarding. Plus their completely differing personalities add something fresh and new as well as their fighting style. When it comes to the visual and cinematography, I noticed some really striking elements that stood out to me in Part 2. The global expansion of Cobra Kai Part 2 is visually brought to life with its introduction of international dojos, each with a distinct style that reflects its cultural roots. From the sleek precision of Dojo Berlin to the bold energy of Dublin Thunders, and the enigmatic edge of Fauci della Noche, the visuals highlight each dojo's unique fighting philosophy. These differences deepen the competition stakes and emphasize the global stage of the Sekai Taikai tournament, giving the season a fresh and dynamic element. The cinematography heightens the tension in long, drawn-out fight sequences. The camera's deliberate focus on every move, whether it's a perfectly timed block or a devastating kick, adds to the suspense. The tight angles and fluid tracking shots make you feel like you're in the middle of the action, amplifying the stakes as each character battles their personal and physical challenges. The visual and cinematography play a crucial role in resolving key moments. For example, in the Sekai Taikai tournament, the crisp editing and dramatic lighting shift the focus onto the fighters' final moves, visually highlighting their growth and determination. It creates a satisfying payoff as the tension built throughout the fights finally releases. The visual and cinematography really worked well with where the stories reached to. It drove the suspense and tension through the fighting scenes to make it more thrilling and visually impactful to watch. When it comes to the entertainment value, I do think that Part 2 of Cobra Kai has met expectations. I think that all of the components, from the acting to the fighting sequences, the visuals, the cinematography, the music, the plot and storyline, all really complemented each other. Part 2 definitely does show progression on from Part 1, and I do think it's better, but that's probably because everything's heated up. I do think it's pretty annoying how they've laid out the release dates for Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3 instead of releasing all of the season at once, but I can understand why they've done that. I do think that they need to be a little bit careful when it comes to the development of the issues surrounding the characters and their relationship problems, and I also think that they need to be very careful with the side plot that's surrounding Mr. Miyagi's past, because they've not really made any progress on sharing an understanding of what happened all those years ago with Mr. Miyagi when he was in the Sekai Taikai competition, and we really don't have that long to go, so it will definitely be interesting to see how that plays out. Overall, I think Part 2 of Cobra Kai's Season 6 has been a success. Packed with suspense, tension and action, it really helps capture the intrigue of the show, keeping you hooked and wanting more. I give Season 6 Part 2 of Cobra Kai a 4 out of 5 buckets, meaning it's a binge-watching blockbuster. So here's the binge-watching question. If you had to pick between joining Miyagi-Do Karate, Cobra Kai, or the Iron Dragons dojo, which would you choose? For me personally, I'd join the Iron Dragons because they are insanely good. But let me know what all of you think down in the comments below. As always, don't forget to smash a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and follow us on social media to stay up to date with the latest content. If you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more. I'm Matthew, this is Binge Watcher. Thanks for binging with me.